Imagine uncovering a highly complex technical document, right? And it details a very specific chemical formula.
Oh, sure.
It requires metal salt solutions, acidic water, and like this incredibly precise sequence of steps to successfully electroplate copper with a layer of gold.
Right, a purely mechanical, chemical process.
Exactly. But then imagine that same text just abruptly transitions into detailing the construction of radar systems.
Wow.
Systems designed to detect invisible aerial craft and outlining the gyroscopic stabilization you'd need for inter-universe flight.
Which is just a massive leap.
It is. And finally, imagine that the author credited with these aerospace engineering schematics is, well, he's an ancient forest-dwelling ascetic from thousands of years ago.
A man who is primarily known for writing foundational texts on grammar, ethics, and holistic medicine.
Yeah, it completely breaks your brain.
It creates this immediate cognitive dissonance, because when we examine historical figures, we typically expect to find a localized area of expertise.
Right, like a specialist.
Exactly. A brilliant physician is remembered for medicine. A legendary tactician is remembered for warfare. We possess this innate desire to categorize genius into digestible, siloed disciplines.
We want to put them in a neat little box.
But the subject we are examining today shatters that entirely. The deeper you delve into the ancient Vedic texts, the more you realize that this one individual sage Bharadwaja operates not as a mere historical specialist, but, well, as a conceptual bedrock for nearly every advanced intellectual discipline in ancient Indian history.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. We are thrilled you are joining us today because we are taking a massive stack of sources. We're talking Ayurvedic medical treatises, encyclopedias of ancient lore, highly controversial aerospace claims, and even peer-reviewed metallurgical analyses.
It's quite a stack.
It really is. And we are synthesizing them all for you. Our mission here is to bridge that seemingly impossible gap between ancient mythological lore and modern scientific interpretation. We want to figure out who Bharadwaja actually was and why his name became entirely synonymous with the absolute limits of human knowledge. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, and before we do, I think we need to set the tone a bit. The intention here is not to force a modern scientific template onto ancient mythology, right? Nor is it to just dismiss all the mythology as mere fiction.
We're taking an objective look.
Exactly. Rather, we are looking at the mechanics of the legacy itself. Why did so many disparate fields, from like the physical chemistry of zinc distillation to the metaphysical philosophy of cosmic energy, why did they attach their foundational principles to this one specific sage?
And to really understand that, we have to start with the foundational architecture of his identity, beginning with just the etymology of his name. Bharadwaja is a Sanskrit compound. You have the root hara or harad and vaja or vajam.
And when you synthesize those,
it translates beautifully to bringing about nourishment. And as we comb through all these sources, you start to see that this concept of nourishment isn't just a poetic moniker. It functions as the operational directive of his entire existence.
he's not just hoarding knowledge.
No, not at all. He accumulates it specifically to sustain and elevate human civilization.
Which perfectly aligns with the pedigree established for him in the Vedic tradition. The texts describe him as the son of Brihaspati, who was the deity sage that actually served as the guru to the gods themselves, and Mamata.
Talk about an intellectual royal family.
Oh, absolutely. He's a direct descendant of the great sage Anjurasa. But more critically, he is categorized as one of the Saptarshis of the present Manvantara.
We should definitely define that for the listener because Manvantara is a concept that fundamentally alters the scale of the history we're talking about today.
It really does.
We aren't talking about a dynasty that lasts a few centuries.
Yeah.
In Hindu cosmology, a Manvantara is this massive astronomical period of time, an age of a Manu spanning millions of years.
Million.
Yeah. And the Saptarshis, the seven great sages, they're essentially the cosmic patriarchs, right? The guiding intelligence is assigned to maintain dharma and preserve knowledge throughout that specific epoch.
Right. So by identifying Bharadwaja as a Saptarshi, the literature immediately removes him from the realm of the ordinary human scholar. He is positioned as an architectural pillar of cosmic order. He is essentially an entity engineered to manage and distribute universal data.
Which brings us to how he actually acquires that data. There's this profound narrative from the Bhagavata Purana that deals directly with his epistemology of learning, the story of the three mountains.
I love this story. It's such a striking philosophical allegory.
It really is. So Bharadwaja dedicates himself to studying the Vedas, which, represent the totality of universal knowledge. And he studies continuously for 1,000 years.
A literal millennium.
Right. And reaching the end of that millennium, he realizes the sheer volume of what he doesn't know still vastly outweighs what he's actually learned. So he goes to the god Indra and petitions for an extension of his lifespan.
And Indra grants it.
He does. Another 1,000 years. And this cycle repeats. 2,000 years, 3,000 years, entirely devoted to absorption and analysis. Finally, he asks for a fourth extension.
And at this point, the narrative shifts, doesn't it? It goes from a demonstration of just pure endurance to a fundamental statement about the infinite nature of information. Indra manifests physically. He points to 3 towering, insurmountable mountains in the distance, and then he picks up 3 small handfuls of sand.
Just a few grains, really.
Exactly. He presents the sand to Bharadwaja and explains that these 3 handfuls represent the totality of what the sage has mastered over 3 entire millennia. The 3 massive mountains. That represents the knowledge that remains untouched.
I mean, just imagine the psychological weight of that moment. For any rational entity, realizing that 3,000 years of rigorous, unbroken study basically amounts to a rounding error in the grand scheme of universal knowledge, that would be paralyzing.
Oh, completely.
It's the ultimate confrontation with intellectual futility. The natural human response would be to just throw your hands up and stop.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Bharadwaja's response here defines his archetype. He does not succumb to the futility. He accepts the infinite nature of the mountain and continues the climb.
He just keeps going.
Because he understands that the value of learning is not in the completion of the task. Completion is mathematically impossible. The value is in the pursuit itself. If you are someone who constantly seeks out information, analyzes systems, and attempts to broaden your understanding of the world, Bharadwaja functions as your ultimate conceptual patron. He is the purest distillation of the lifelong learner.
And that insatiable drive makes his appearances in the great epics, like the Ramayana and Mahabharata, so compelling. Because he isn't just, sitting in a cave meditating for those thousands of years. He is actively deploying his knowledge to manipulate the physical world around him.
Very actively.
In the Ramayana, his ashram at Prayag, which is modern-day Allahabad, right at the confluence of the Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati rivers, it acts as this crucial strategic and spiritual waypoint.
For Rama, Sita, and Lakshmana.
Right, at the very onset of their exile. He acts as the ultimate navigator for them, providing precise geographical directions, telling them to cross the Yamuna on a raft and locate a specific Shyam banyan tree so they can reach Chitrakuta safely.
But the more revealing demonstration of his capabilities actually occurs a bit later when Rama's brother, Bharata, arrives at the ashram, and Bharata brings an entire marching army with him.
A massive force.
Huge. And Bharadwaja elects to host this army, and he does so by engaging a concept known as tapas.
And we should clarify this because we often see tapas translated simply as like asceticism or penance. But looking at the sources, it's described as something much closer to the generation of kinetic or thermodynamic spiritual energy.
It is heat. It is power accumulated through intense physical and mental discipline.
And he utilizes this accumulated power to literally rewrite the material reality around his ashram.
The descriptions are highly specific regarding the mechanics of this event. He doesn't merely conjure a mirage or an illusion. He summons Vishvakarma, the celestial architect, to construct physical infrastructure.
Like actual buildings.
Yes. He manifests apsaras, these celestial beings like Gritachi and Hema. The texts detail complex logistics, describing autonomous food delivery systems where dishes literally serve themselves to the soldiers.
It's a total sensory and material override of the local environment. It's wild. And then, when the army awakens the next morning, the energetic projection just ends and the magical infrastructure vanishes.
Oof, gone.
It demonstrates a mastery over the material universe that honestly borders on simulation theory. He's altering the localized physics to provide temporary, absolute luxury. But, his utilization of power isn't always so benevolent.
No, it is not.
When we transition to his presence in the Mahabharata, the application of his knowledge takes a distinctly lethal trajectory.
The shift in his narrative role here is abrupt, but it's vital to understanding his polymathic nature. In the Mahabharata, he's a biological father and the primary instructor of Dronacharya.
The legendary weapons master.
Exactly. The man who ultimately commands the armies and shapes the strategies of the devastating Kurukshetra war.
And the mechanics of Drona's conception are deeply mythological, right? It involves the Apsara Gritachi and a vessel or pot known as a drona.
which is essentially an ancient allegory for an externalized, non-traditional gestation.
Right. But the more pressing element for our deep dive is the curriculum. Bharadwaja personally instructs Drona in advanced martial sciences. He's the custodian of the Agnya weapon, which is a devastating fire-based missile system. And he imparts this not only to Drona but to another disciple named Agnavesa.
We really must pause to examine the friction here.
Yeah, it's a huge contrast.
The sage whose very name defines him as the bringer of nourishment, the ascetic who utilizes his power to feed and shelter entire armies, is simultaneously the keeper and disseminator of apocalyptic military technology.
He is actively propagating the sciences of destruction.
That friction forces a crucial analysis of how we view ancient epistemology. How does the architect of a fire missile system transition into being the unsung hero of ancient human medicine?
Right, because that's what happens. The through line seems totally counterintuitive until you view it through the lens of that core directive we mentioned: preservation.
Exactly.
The requirement to nourish and protect a population naturally forces a confrontation with the primary threat to that population. And beyond warfare, that threat is systemic disease.
The texts, specifically the foundational medical treatise, the Charaka Samhita, outline a severe biological crisis during this era. Humanity was experiencing an unprecedented surge in debilitating diseases.
And this wasn't viewed merely as a public health emergency. It was seen as a total collapse of human purpose. Because in the Vedic framework, a human life is structured around 4 primary objectives, the Purusharthas.
Yes. You have dharma, which constitutes ethical duty and righteousness.
Artha, the pursuit of economic stability and prosperity.
Kama, the pursuit of desire, pleasure, and emotional fulfillment.
In moksha, the ultimate pursuit of spiritual liberation.
And a physical body ravaged by severe illness simply cannot execute any of those functions. Chronic pain and physical degradation prohibit the performance of duty, the accumulation of wealth, the experience of pleasure, and the intense cognitive focus required for spiritual liberation.
Disease was essentially stalling the evolutionary engine of human consciousness.
So the response to this crisis is framed as a massive intellectual summit. The greatest minds of the era, figures like Vashista, Kashyapa, Vishwamitra, and Bhrigu, they convened in the Himalayas.
It was a rigorous pooling of data and resources to isolate a solution for human suffering. And through their collective analysis, they determined that the ultimate, uncorrupted science of health was currently maintained by the deity Indra.
And the lineage of that knowledge is highly specific. Brahma originated it, transferred it to Daksha Prajapati, who transferred it to the Ashwini twins, who then transferred it to Indra.
So this Himalayan summit needed a representative capable of traversing the conceptual and physical distance to access Indra's database. And given his Saptarshi status and his millennia of accumulated cognitive bandwidth, Bharadwaja bravely volunteers as the envoy.
And when he accesses Indra, the method of data transfer is genuinely fascinating. Indra does not provide a massive, protracted explanation.
He doesn't have to.
Right. Recognizing Bharadwaja's extreme analytical capacity, Indra transmits the entirety of Ayurvedic science in an incredibly compressed, highly efficient format.
Knowing the sage needed no long explanations.
That compressed format is the Trisutra Ayurveda, the 3-threaded framework. And this is the exact moment where the narrative transitions away from mythological intervention and establishes a rigorous, empirical, and highly recognizable scientific method.
It's so modern.
The Trisutra organizes all of medical science into 3 distinct pillars.
The first pillar is Hetu, which addresses the causative factors of a disease. And I love this because this isn't about identifying a curse or demonic possession. It is about analyzing environmental variables, dietary habits, and genetic predispositions. It is the literal science of etiology and prevention.
Absolutely. Then the second pillar is Linga, focusing on signs and symptoms. This is the diagnostic framework. It involves rigorous observation, analyzing the pulse, examining the temperature, the coloration, the physical manifestations of the internal imbalance.
And the third pillar is Aushadha, the therapeutic countermeasures, the pharmacology, the specific herbal compounds, the behavioral modifications required to restore the biological system to equilibrium.
Cause, symptom, cure.
It's brilliant.
When you analyze the Trisutra, you are looking at the foundational logic of modern pathology and clinical diagnosis. Bharadwaja did not return from the celestial realms with a series of mystical incantations. He returned with a systematized, peer-reviewable framework for biological engineering.
And the transmission of this framework ensures its survival. He returns to Earth and teaches this science to his disciples, most notably Punarvasu Atreya.
Who, in turn, instructs a cohort of 6 brilliant scholars.
Right. like Nivesha, Bela, Jatakarna, Parashara, Harita, and Chirapani. And Agnivesha documents this entirely in the Agnivesha Tantra, which, after centuries of redaction and refinement, solidified. The text documents his assertion that an embryo is absolutely not formed by the urges of the mind, by specific wishes, by fervent prayers, or by any sort of divine intervention.
In an era where fertility and reproduction were almost universally attributed to the favor of the gods or spiritual determinism, that is a radical paradigm shift.
It's completely mechanistic. He states that conception is the direct result of the physical union of a man's sperm and a woman's ovum, described contextually as menstrual blood in the text, occurring at the precise, correct phase of her reproductive cycle within the womb.
He strips away the theology and leaves only the biological mechanics.
And he applies that same mechanistic logic to the nervous system through the development of Ayurvedic acupressure.
The treatises attributed to him here do not view the body as a solid, inert mass, but as a complex matrix of energetic and physical pathways.
And the matrix he developed to map those pathways is incredibly dense. He created a system that combined the 5 fundamental physical elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and ether.
With 5 metaphysical elements.
Right. Time, direction, mind, soul, and darkness. And he used this 10-element theoretical proxy to map out highly specific pressure points on the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet.
What you are seeing there is an ancient attempt to systematize neural pathways and systemic feedback loops without the benefit of dissection or microscopic imaging.
Which is mind-blowing.
It is. The underlying theory posits that the localized application of physical pressure can trigger systemic corrections in distant areas of the body. He used this 10-element matrix to develop precise treatment protocols for 42 distinct diseases.
See, as an observer examining this from the modern era, the cognitive load attributed to this single individual feels unmanageable.
It pushes boundaries of belief.
Exactly. I mean, we are discussing a figure who is mapping embryology without a microscope, defining acupressure matrices on the palm, while simultaneously being recognized as the architect of divine fire missile systems and the host of reality-bending banquets.
The skepticism naturally arises.
It has to. Are we looking at one historical polymath, or are we looking at an ancient branding exercise, where a lineage of scholars simply slap the name Bharadwaja onto every major intellectual breakthrough to ensure its cultural authority?
That skepticism is the cornerstone of modern historical analysis. From an academic standpoint, the consensus leans heavily toward the latter. The Bharadwaja Gotra, the lineage of his descendants and intellectual disciples, is vast.
So multiple people over time.
Yes. It is highly probable that multiple generations of brilliant scholars attributed their advancements to the founding patriarch as a gesture of reverence and to establish immediate textual legitimacy.
However, the fact that a single name could theoretically encompass all of these disciplines points to a fundamental difference in how the Vedic mind organized reality.
They didn't view these fields as distinct.
Precisely. In the modern educational infrastructure, we isolate data. Physics is separated from philosophy, linguistics is isolated from biology, but the Vedic worldview operated on what we might call a unified field theory of knowledge.
The laws governing the combustion of a weapon are the exact same thermodynamic laws governing the digestion of food in Ayurveda.
Right.
The rhythms and structural integrity required for a biological system to survive are identical to the structural integrity required for a language to survive.
Which perfectly bridges the gap to his work in linguistics. Because if you have accumulated this massive, interconnected database of medical, martial, and universal knowledge, your immediate operational problem is data degradation.
How do you store it?
Exactly. How do you store it, and how do you transmit it across thousands of years without the data becoming corrupted?
In a purely oral culture where physical storage mediums do not exist or are highly perishable, human memory is the only hard drive.
And memory is flawed.
Deeply flawed. Accents shift, colloquialisms evolve, and over a few generations, the original meaning of a text can be entirely lost.
To solve that, Bharadwaja essentially acted as a systems engineer for the Sanskrit language. He is credited as the author of the Bharadwaja Siksa, a highly advanced treatise on phonetics.
The Rig Veda positions him as the 4th great grammarian in existence, following Brahma, Brihaspati, and Indra.
And we must understand that Vedic grammar was not about polite conversation. It wasn't about sounding smart. It was a rigorous mathematical science of acoustic precision.
Because the mantras contained within the Vedas were considered to possess literal, physical efficacy. If the pronunciation was altered in the slightest degree, The harmonic resonance was broken, and the formula simply failed.
So the Bharadwaja Siksa establishes the parameters for svara, or pronunciation, outlining strict rules for intonation. It mandates the precise usage of udatta, which is the raised or acute tone,
And anudata, the lowered or grave tone.
and svarita, the neutral or circumflex tone.
It operates precisely like a compression algorithm with built-in error checking, similar to parity bits in computer code.
I love that analogy.
By locking the data into a strict meter and mandating the exact pitch and duration of every single syllable, Bharadwaja ensured that if a reciter dropped a sound or altered a tone, the acoustic structure would visibly collapse.
Alerting the reciter to the data corruption immediately.
He standardized the phonetic transmission so perfectly that the audio data remained intact, unmodified for millennia.
He engineered the survival of the culture's operating system. And he didn't restrict his systematization to linguistics and biology either. He applied that same rigorous architectural logic to human behavior and societal structure, authoring foundational works on Niti Shastra.
Niti Shastra encompasses the sciences of ethics, governance, and practical political conduct. It is the blueprint for maintaining societal equilibrium.
Within these texts, he wrestles with the perpetual conflict between dharma, moral righteousness and justice, and artha, material prosperity and statecraft.
Finding the balance.
Right. How does a sovereign entity accumulate the wealth and power necessary to defend its borders without becoming the tyranny it seeks to oppose? His theories on resource distribution, impartiality, and the ethical constraints of power were so highly regarded that they were heavily cited centuries later by Kautilya, also known as Chanakya.
And Chanakya is arguably the most ruthless and brilliant political strategist in Indian history, the architect of the Maurya Empire.
Right.
For Chanakya to cite Bharadwaja extensively in his magnum opus, the Arthashastra, is equivalent to a modern physicist citing Einstein. It establishes Bharadwaja as a foundational architect of geopolitical theory.
And the geopolitical reality of the ancient world required a highly systematized approach to violence. Which brings us back to his connection to Drona and the Mahabharata.
The same sage who wrote the treatises on ethical governance and the anatomical pathways of healing is also the recognized author of the Dhanurveda.
The Dhanurveda is classified as an Upaveda, an applied science directly associated with the Yajurveda. It is the definitive ancient manual on the mechanics and philosophy of warfare.
What fascinates me is the categorization. He applies the exact same structural taxonomy to weaponry that he applied to disease in Ayurveda. The Dhanurveda meticulously categorizes the tools of war into 4 distinct classes based on their physical mechanics. The first class is Muktayuddha, encompassing all projectile weapons, arrows, spears, anything that is physically released from the operator.
The second is Amuktayuddha, the melee weapons. Swords, maces, weapons requiring continuous physical contact and localized leverage.
The fourth class, skipping the third for a moment, is Mantramukta, which includes the divine or energy-based weapons powered by specific harmonic incantations.
Reflecting the mystical artillery like the Agneya weapon we discussed earlier.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It is the third category that forces us to pause and deeply analyze the source material. The third category is Yantramukta. Translated literally, it means mechanical weapons.
This category deals with warfare devices that utilize mechanical advantage tension, torsion, and complex structural engineering. We're talking about ancient artillery, catapult systems, and siege engines.
And crucially, the Dhanurveda doesn't just explain how to build a catapult, it explicitly legislates when you are allowed to use it.
The ethics of war.
Right. It mandates the strict integration of dharma into warfare. It outlines clear rules of engagement, expressly forbidding the targeting of civilians, the unarmed, or those who have surrendered. It is a highly formalized system that acknowledges the necessity of kinetic force while attempting to prevent the descent into absolute barbarism.
It demands that the warrior operating the technology possesses a moral framework as sophisticated as the engineering framework.
But I want to anchor our focus firmly on that specific term, Yantramukta, mechanical devices. Because if Bharadwaja's intellectual lineage was actively exploring complex mechanical engineering, analyzing torsion and material stress for warfare, it acts as a bizarrely plausible bridge to the most highly debated, controversial aspect of his entire legacy.
Here we go.
If they were building mechanical siege weapons, is it possible to give any credence to the claims that Bharadwaja was the literal father of ancient aerospace engineering?
We have now crossed the threshold into the most polarizing intersection of ancient textual analysis and modern scientific scrutiny. The controversy centers entirely around a specific document, the the Brihad Viman Shastra, more commonly referred to as the Vyamanika Shastra.
And the claims surrounding this text are staggering. Some texts credit him as the father of aeronautical and aerospace engineering. This document explicitly attributes 500 distinct guidelines for the design, construction, and operation of flying machines, Vimanas, to Maharshi Bharadwaja.
And we must be clear for you listening, the text is not describing mythological chariots pulled by magical horses. It is formatted as a dense, highly technical engineering manual.
The scope of the manuals is vast, categorizing flight into 3 operational theaters. You have intraplanetary travel within the Earth's atmosphere, interplanetary travel between celestial bodies, and inter-universe travel.
Which suggests a theoretical framework for traversing dimensional or cosmic boundaries.
The text outlines several specific models of Vimanas, including the Shakuna, the Sundara, the Rukma, and the Tripura. But what really demands attention are the auxiliary systems described in the text. It doesn't just say the machine flies. It attempts to explain how it evades detection and navigates.
It describes a mechanism utilizing localized wind and sunlight manipulation to render the craft optically invisible, which reads as an ancient conceptualization of active camouflage or stealth technology.
And it outlines a system designed to detect invisible enemy craft. It describes using a specific electrical force to reveal these invisible enemy ships, projecting their location onto a screen inside the cockpit. That is, conceptually, a direct description of a radar system.
Furthermore, it dedicates significant portions to material science, recognizing that standard wood or iron would be insufficient for aerospace stresses.
It dictates the synthesis of specific, highly resilient, heat-resistant metal alloys, naming them Shiva Prakash and Sundara Kalpaka, and describes the incorporation of gyroscopic mechanisms for flight stabilization.
But the most granular detail, and the one that truly tests the boundaries of historical plausibility, is a step-by-step chemical breakdown of an electroplating process.
This part blew my mind.
The text outlines a procedure called Shat Kumbha. It describes the use of specific metal salt solutions combined with acidic water to chemically coat copper components with a thin layer of gold or silver.
That is not poetry. That is an electrochemical reaction.
Now, if we are strictly following the parameters of impartial analysis, we must examine how the academic and scientific communities evaluate these claims, and the division is stark.
Proponents of the text's ancient authenticity argue that it provides the missing mechanical blueprint for the Vimanas that are casually mentioned throughout the ancient epics. When Ravana flies the Pushpaka Vimana in the Ramayana, proponents argue that the Vaimanika Shastra proves it was an engineered craft, not a magical anomaly, representing the apex of a highly advanced, subsequently lost ancient civilization.
Conversely, the counter-argument from modern historians, linguists, and aerospace engineers is built on substantial evidentiary hurdles. The most critical issue is the text's provenance. The Vaimanika Shastra did not exist in any known historical archive or public record prior to the early 20th century.
It was introduced by a man named Pandit Subbaraya Shastri, who claimed that the highly technical knowledge was revealed to him through mystical channeling or psychic dictation from the ancient sage himself.
From a linguistic perspective, scholars analyzing the Sanskrit used in the Vaimanika Shastra point out that the vocabulary, syntax, and grammatical structures do not align with the ancient Vedic Sanskrit that the historical Bharadwaja would have utilized. The language appears to be of a much later medieval or modern construction.
Furthermore, when actual modern aerospace engineers have evaluated the schematics, specifically the aerodynamic profiles of the Rukma, or Shakuna Vimanas, they concluded that the designs violate fundamental laws of aerodynamics. Modern tests have failed. The physical dimensions and proposed propulsion systems lack the coherence required to generate sustainable lift.
So, the rigorous academic consensus views the text as an early 20th century creation, an esoteric work heavily influenced by the dawn of modern aviation, which retroactively applied ancient terminology to contemporary mechanical concepts.
But I have to push back here, or at least play devil's advocate regarding the implications of the text. If we accept the academic consensus that the language is modern and the aerodynamics are flawed, we can't just grandfather it in as verifiable ancient Vedic science. We have to treat it as a modern esoteric document. But the vital question remains. Why did the author of this 20th century text choose Bharadwaja as the definitive architect of these machines? Why not Vishvakarma, the literal god of architecture?
This raises an important question. Even if the text is a modern fabrication, the selection of Bharadwaja is profoundly telling. It proves that within the deep cultural memory of India, Bharadwaja's name functions as the ultimate seal of scientific authority. If you are going to present a text outlining the bleeding edge of radar, stealth, and aerospace technology, you attribute it to the one entity whose legacy already encompasses the mastery of all known physical and metaphysical sciences. He is the ultimate conceptual vessel for advanced engineering.
And that reputation for advanced engineering isn't solely reliant on controversial flying machines. We can entirely set aside the Vaimanika Shastra and still find historically verified, tangible metallurgical wonders intrinsically linked to his broader alchemical and scientific legacy.
The material sciences developed in ancient India were, in many specific applications, centuries ahead of their global contemporaries.
Let's examine the metallurgy of zinc. The smelting of zinc presents a massive thermodynamic problem. The metal vaporizes at approximately 907 degrees Celsius.
Which is an issue.
A huge issue. If you attempt to extract zinc by simply throwing the raw ore into a standard furnace fire, the metal turns into a gas and boils away into the atmosphere before you can collect a single drop. Yet Indian metallurgists were the first in the world to successfully smelt pure zinc.
They achieved this through the development of a highly sophisticated industrial distillation process. Archaeological evidence from the Zawar mines in Rajasthan demonstrates massive, commercial-scale zinc production dating back to the 12th century CE.
With the underlying chemical knowledge likely predating that era by several centuries, the mechanics of the distillation process are brilliant. They didn't just build a hotter fire, they engineered a closed thermodynamic system.
They created clay retorts and filled them with a precise mixture of crushed zinc ore and carbon-rich charcoal, and then placed them upside down inside the furnace.
As the furnace heated, the zinc would reach its boiling point and vaporize. But because the retort was inverted, the gas was forced to travel downward,
Escaping the intense heat of the combustion chamber.
right, and entering a precisely calibrated cooling chamber below, where the vapor condensed back into pure, solid metal. Texts like the Anshubodhini, which are traditionally attributed to the scientific lineage of Haraja, contain detailed treatises on the construction of these specific furnace designs, the precise geometry of the condensation chambers, and the theories of metal separation.
It requires a profound empirical understanding of chemistry, phase changes, and thermodynamics. We see that same mastery of material properties reflected in the Iron Pillar of Delhi.
Created during the Gupta Empire around 400 CE.
Yes, this 23-foot-tall iron column has been entirely exposed to the elements for over 1,600 years, yet it famously exhibits almost no signs of rust or corrosion.
Modern metallurgists have rigorously analyzed the pillar to understand its longevity. They discovered that the ancient smiths did not just stumble into a lucky batch of iron.
No, it was deliberate.
The corrosion resistance is the result of a highly specific passive protective film, a layer of misolite, that forms at the interface between the iron and the initial layer of rust.
And this protective barrier was achieved by deliberately maintaining an unusually high phosphorus content within the iron and by utilizing a manufacturing technique known as forge welding.
They didn't melt the iron into a liquid cast.
Right. They heated solid pieces of iron to a critical temperature and hammered them together, a solid-state welding process that allowed the phosphorus to remain distributed within the microstructure of the metal.
The physical chemistry required to achieve that specific microstructural alignment perfectly echoes the advanced metallurgical theories maintained within the broader scientific lore associated with Bharadwaja.
Even when we analyze the oldest foundational texts, the Rig Veda and the Yajur Veda, we find hymns attributing the generation of fire through friction, the conceptual extraction of subterranean oils and natural gas, and even early concepts of hydroelectric power from pond water directly to his lineage.
When you compile the totality of this data, the scale of the legacy is just overwhelming. We're analyzing a framework that encompasses the diagnostic logic of Ayurveda, the biomechanical mapping of acupressure, the acoustic algorithms of linguistic preservation, the ethical constraints of geopolitical warfare, the thermodynamic engineering of metallurgy, and even the theoretical physics of aerospace flight.
It brings us to the ultimate synthesis of this deep dive. How do we process the existence of this figure? Whether we view Bharadwaja as a literal, historical superhuman who mastered every conceivable discipline within an extended lifespan,
Or whether we view him as the founding patriarch of the Bharadwaja Gotra, a massive, multi-generational intellectual dynasty that continues to exist today, with over 1,400 branches of descendants tracing their lineage back to him.
the literal historicity almost becomes secondary to the function of the archetype itself. Bharadwaja represents the absolute zenith of human intellectual potential.
He really is the ultimate patron for the learner. If you are listening to this and you are driven by an innate desire to dismantle complex topics, to find the hidden architecture behind how the world works, Bharadwaja is your ultimate inspiration. He is your conceptual ancestor.
But what elevates his legacy beyond mere trivia accumulation is the application of the data. He didn't just learn to hoard knowledge, he learned medicine to heal and eradicate suffering.
He mapped the grammar of his language to ensure the survival of his culture's deepest truths. He studied the ethics of governance to protect society from tyranny. Every single byte of data he acquired was weaponized for the betterment of the human condition. He truly lived up to his name, bringing about nourishment.
And studying his legacy leaves you with a vital reevaluation of how we approach education and progress today. The modern world is defined by extreme hyper-specialization. We easily separate science, spirituality, linguistics, and medicine into different university departments today. The disciplines are isolated, speaking entirely different academic dialects.
They don't talk to each other.
Exactly. But Bharadwaja's legacy suggests that to truly understand the universe, we might need to stop looking at these as separate fields and realize they're all just different dialects of the exact same language.
It's a profound paradigm shift.
It leaves us with a final thought to mull over. What could we achieve today if we trained our minds to see the mechanical engineering embedded within a poem, or the spiritual philosophy dictating a medical diagnosis?
When you finally align all the historical data and illuminate the legacy of Sage Bharadwaja, you don't merely see the profile of an ancient doctor or a grammarian or an engineer. You're looking at an ancient blueprint of the universe itself, decoded and preserved by one extraordinary lineage. Keep learning. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.